After 5 years of living on the road full time, we've experienced things that no one prepared us for. Some were happy surprises. Some we really wish someone had told us about.
So join us as we go through some of the lessons, challenges, and surprises that we've had in the last 5 years.
I think the best way for us to start this video off is to tell you why we started.
Yeah, we had been living in Greenville ever since we met. We met in Greenville, North Carolina, and so we were living in an apartment there, and I was working as a nurse. He had finished recently a contract with a aerospace company as a quality engineer and was looking for something else. And the manufacturing wasn't so great in that part of North Carolina at the time, and he was having difficulty finding something. And we were texting back and forth while I was at work one day about, options. What are we going to do next? And I said, well, we could, I'm telling you just off the top of my head, said, well, I could become a travel nurse and we could get an RV and travel.
Cindy had told me previous to any of this conversation that there was somebody that she worked with that was a travel nurse.
Yeah, I had not ever heard of it when I was in school. And then once I started working, I met several travel nurses, and there was this particular guy, young guy, had a little short school bus that he was renovating, and it sounded so exciting. And he had met a girl, they had fallen in love, and they were going to finish renovating this short school bus and take off travel nursing. And I thought that was the most exciting thing I'd ever heard of, because it just seemed so cool. You just fly by the seat of your pants, go work different places. But I really didn't think it was for me. I thought, in fact, I said to them, if I was your age, I would definitely do this. I was in this age thing, and that was 5 years ago. So, but I had said that to them. But on our text message, I said to Felix, I could become a travel nurse and we could just travel around. Well, that's all he needed to hear.
Yeah, You may or may not know this about me, but I tend to just grab a hold of something and run with it. And
that was in July?
I think it was June.
June.
I think it was June.
We had the first even just flippant conversation about it. And by September 29th, we were on the road.
Actually, in August, we bought the first RV we ever owned, which was a 2020 Keystone Bullet. And on September 30th, 2019, I hooked the RV up. Cindy was at work, so this was all on me. I hooked the RV up, loaded up our fur babies, and headed to Grifton, North Carolina, which we were going to stay for a month.
And then we were going, I already had my contract in Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma. So we went from there, after a month in Grifton, straight to Tulsa, which was quite the adventure for people who had never even driven an RV pulled behind a truck at all.
I had towed my boat, and, it's a big difference. And we got to Tulsa. How we got to Tulsa is still beyond me, because...
It's kind of a blur.
Yeah, because quite honestly, the truck wasn't in any way, shape, or form capable of really pulling that RV. I shouldn't have been using it. And going over the Mississippi River Bridge, we had such high winds that the tail was wagging the dog. Okay, but we got to Tulsa, and Cindy became the first ever travel nurse at that hospital that she was working at.
And loved it. Loved the hospital, loved the unit particularly that I was on, loved the kind of cardiac nursing I was doing. And then we left there and went to Las Cruces.
Which, this whole thing between Tulsa and Las Cruces we've talked about in other videos. We had some serious issues going through the mountains outside of Santa Rosa. But we got to Las Cruces.
And that was 2020. And actually, we all know what
February of
February
2020.
2020.
Yes.
And I did my 13 weeks, 3 months. And towards the end of it, they wanted to know if I wanted to extend and stay there. And we kind of talked about it, and by then, COVID was starting to be a huge deal. It was at the very, very beginning, and we were getting reports of anything from it's only going to last 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to be locked down for 2 or 3 weeks, to you can't cross the state border.
Right. I mean, people were talking about there is no way you can go cross country at this time. Okay. I mean, this was in the news and in real, reliable news. And we had just bought the new truck, the F-250, which I recently traded in. And then what happened, honey?
We were planning, we decided to stay for 3 more months. We thought, well, we're here, we know the area, we're familiar with it. We'll just ride it out another 3 months to see what's going to happen with this pandemic. So I re-signed my contract for another 13 weeks. And just a few days later, I got a text in the middle of my shift saying that all travel nurses had been canceled. Don't come in if you're scheduled to come in tonight. And I was working days. It was the middle of my shift. And I was just flabbergasted. Had no idea they were going to do that. It was not a smart move on their part because I'm sure they had to hire more travel nurses later. But at that point, we had to decide what we were going to do. By the time I got home that evening, I had already talked to my recruiter, and he already had some other opportunities close around. And we wanted to stay somewhere close by that we could just go in a few hours because we honestly didn't know what the situation was going to be with travel.
Now, we were thousands of miles away from anyone we knew, even remotely. We just picked up a new payment on a truck. And Cindy, who was the only breadwinner in the family at that point, had lost her job. And we had no idea if we were doing the right thing.
We had to think about, are we going to try and go? I mean, home was North Carolina. We're in New Mexico. We didn't know if we could get there or not with the news we were hearing. We weren't sure. I wasn't sure as a medical professional what was going to happen as far as the whole pandemic situation.
So yeah, that whole thumbnail thing where we almost quit, it's not a stretch. This wasn't clickbait.
It was a discussion.
We had a discussion about just trying to make our way back across country and her going back to work for the hospital she'd been working at and just doing the best we could.
But my recruiter had an opportunity in Tucson, which was just a few hours away. And so we decided we would go for that, ride that out in Tucson for 3 more months, see what was going to happen from then on. And of course, we all know the next 2 years was really dicey. So there was no problem getting a job anywhere I wanted to work during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
There were more jobs than there were nurses, as there usually are. But it was even more so during the pandemic. And so we were able to kind of choose where we wanted to go. From Tucson, ended up going to Georgia.
Tifton, Georgia. And the nicest RV park that we've ever stayed at.
And then the pandemic started dying down some. We stayed there 6 months, and it became a little bit more normal, well, the new normal. And so from there, it was a little bit more smooth sailing because we knew what we were doing more so than we had. And we were more comfortable. I was more comfortable as a travel nurse. We were more comfortable traveling with the RV. And so things got a little bit smoother after that.
And then when we went to South Carolina, we bought this rig. And
I look back and I can't understand how we stayed in that little tiny.
Oh my gosh, that was like us living in a smaller than a studio apartment.
Yeah, it was just one room. If you've ever seen a bullet, it's just got the beds right there. There's the kitchen bar. There's the kitchen. We're sitting across from the kitchen watching TV over the sink. I mean, it was very small, and we had 2 cats and a dog. So
I mean, but bear in mind that was basically the only thing on Camping World's lot that I could have pulled with that F-150.
And so we just jumped in it and went with it, and we stayed in it 2 years. So
yeah,
it was amazing.
But then we moved into this, and I can't be happier. I don't think you can either.
It's definitely much more room, definitely more storage. We had almost no storage in the other one, and it's just more like a home than a camper.
Yeah.
So,
And we have 2 rooms.
3 if you count the bathroom.
Yeah. Bottom line is, and this is kind of advice to newbies out there, go for the biggest you can get at the start, because odds are you're going to want to upgrade. And maybe that biggest one is already good enough.
The biggest one you can pull with your tow vehicle and that you can afford.
And also, don't forget, buy, if you can, buy the tow vehicle after you bought the RV.
Yeah, that way you know you've got enough power.
Exactly. After we were in South Carolina, we decided we were going to take a month off. It ended up being a couple of months.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were going to visit my family up in Pennsylvania, which we did. We went up there. The original concept, and again, this is, a wrench getting thrown in the works. Pennsylvania is not what's called a compact state.
It wasn't at the time.
Right.
It is now, but.
And what that means is Cindy's North Carolina nursing license was no good there. She would have had to go and apply for one of their licenses, which it really isn't that much of a big deal. But we had it in our plans that Cindy was going to go there, apply for her nursing license, get a contract there. We were going to be there for 3 or 6 months.
And I had actually started the application process before we ever left South Carolina.
Absolutely. About 3 weeks before we ever left South Carolina.
So I started getting all the paperwork, and it's paperwork when you get a new nursing license. So I started getting everything together. You have to do an FBI background check. You have to do a background check in every state you've ever lived in. You have to do fingerprints. You have to do all kinds of paperwork and validating that you have a valid nursing license and you really graduated from nursing school and all that
pay
stuff.
a lot of money.
Yeah, and pay a lot of money. Each one of those things costs money, plus the license itself costs money.
But she did all that. And that was when Pennsylvania came back to her and said, "Oh, we've got everything. Yeah, you're good. It's going to be about anywhere from 4 to 6 months before we can issue you your license."
Yeah, they were backed up apparently. And nursing boards are always backed up. So that kind of put a wrench out. We couldn't take 4 to 6 months off.
No, I mean, we couldn't be sitting there with no income for 4 to 6 months. So that combined with the horrendous weather that we had while we were there.
It was the springtime. It was rain. Almost every single day it was rainy and just enough cold to hurt your bones.
Yeah, it was not fun, folks. The fun part of it was being able to be with my sons and my sister and my grandkids, yeah. But the rest of it, not so much. So that's when we decided that maybe the East Coast really wasn't for us.
Neither of us like snow, so we knew we weren't staying that long. And we both really loved the Southwest. We had been to New Mexico and Arizona and for short times, and so we knew that we liked the area. We liked the sunshine, we liked the climate, and we liked the scenery, and we liked a lot about it and the people. So we decided to hightail it back across the country again.
And at that point, the hospital she was working in at Las Cruces had actually gotten desperate for travel nurses, but they just weren't paying.
Yeah.
And so we decided to end up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Well, actually, she worked in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We were in a suburb called Rio Rancho.
And Rio Rancho was beautiful. It's a great place, had lots of things to do.
Albuquerque, not so much.
And the hospital itself, you can listen to any nurse who's been there and know that it's not the prime place to work. But people are people everywhere you go. So I worked there 6 months. We moved from there back to Tucson.
Where we pretty much settled in. Cindy got a contract at Tucson Medical Center, and through several discussions, we came to the decision that we were going to go yearly on our space there and make that our home address.
We just established residency there.
Yeah.
And as a byproduct of that, I had to get an Arizona license, which was nothing compared to what Pennsylvania was.
She had it in like a week.
It was unbelievable how easy and simple it was. Which we found out a lot about Arizona, that car registration's easier and cheaper.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Driver's licenses are easier and cheaper. Lots of stuff. So we made out pretty well on that change, and it helped us be more local to our home base, but me still being able to travel in the area.
Yeah, and now we've done a contract using Tucson as our travel point, our point from which we're traveling. Cindy's been able to do a contract here in Cottonwood, Arizona, and shortly hereafter, we'll be going back to Tucson.
I'll be doing a seasonal contract there, which is a little different than with a travel agency. It's actually with the hospital. Pay is good. I know the people. I'm going to be on the same unit I was on when I was there before, which is an orthopedic unit, so I know the people, I know the process, I know what's going on. So it's not going to be a big adjustment to go back to that hospital.
So, I mean, basically here, what we're trying to say is that 5 years into full-time RV living, it isn't all butterflies and rainbows. We have had our disasters, as we talked about in our previous video. We have had our good times, bad times, and downright ugly. But if you go into it with your eyes open, which we didn't, so don't be us. If you go into it with your eyes open, you can make a good life living on the road full time. I mean, we've seen things that we would have never seen if we didn't do this. After Tucson, we're talking about going to California. I've never been to California.
I've been on a couple of short trips there.
Yeah, Cindy's been to like pretty much Los Angeles. And after that, we want to head up to the Pacific coast. And so, I mean, these are all things that we would have never seen or done were it not for full-time RV living. And 5 years now, no regrets.
No regrets.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next week.